Hello and welcome to this on-the-road edition of Fast Forward. We're here at Politics Prose on Connecticut Avenue to talk to Jasper Fforde, whose new book, Shades of Grey, is in bookstores now. Unfortunately, Jasper's schedule did not allow him to visit us in the studio, so we're following him here. And Politics Prose was kind enough to allow us to tape his presentation that he'll be giving in the stores in just a few minutes.
Oh, okay. You gotta love that. Let's welcome Jasper Fforde.
Wow. Gosh. Well, thank you, Connor. For those of you who have read and enjoyed my first two series, the Thursday Next series and Nursery Crime series, this is a slight departure for me. Now, because the first 7 books that I wrote or that I've had published have really been about stealing, paying homage to other people's characters, whether they be nursery rhyme characters or whether they be characters from classical fiction. Now, this is actually a really good wheeze to get onto because effectively I'm mining your heads, right, for these things which already exist. You know, the classics are already up there, and also already up there are all the nursery rhymes. So essentially what I'm doing is taking them out of your head, moving them through 30 degrees, and then popping them back in again. And you're doing the work, and I'm getting the money. You know, it's actually a really good scam that I'm onto. But sooner or later, I think, especially, you know, an author has to start doing something different. Otherwise, there's a possibility of going slightly stale. So I thought, hey, I've got a good idea. Why don't I start writing a novel? You know, that would be quite exciting for me, because I'm going to make up my own characters in my own situations, living in their own world. You know, I'm joking slightly, but it was kind of important for me to sort of start thinking that perhaps I could, you know, grow up a little. That might be bad news, really. But anyway, so I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do here? Well, years ago, and this gives you a little bit of idea about how I write, I started off writing as a very young man when I was about 27, and I started off writing short stories. Right. Now, the point about all these short stories was me kind of learning my trade, which I thought was very, very important. So what I started doing was writing short stories. But what I liked to do was take a very improbable situation and then try and make it real. Okay. This was my sort of challenge. I tend to write through a series of challenges. It's actually quite a good way to write. You sort of set yourself these little sort of things that you've got to do, and then try and write your way out of them. Or it's literally throwing yourself into a narrative hole and saying, right, Jasper, now write your way out of that one. So these short stories were essentially a person, you know, goes downstairs, opens the curtains, and there's a gorilla up his tree. Okay? Write your way out of that, Jasper. Which I did, I thought, quite well. Another one was a man turns into a banana. You know, write your way out of that one. And I did, in a sort of very dark, sort of gothic horror tale, which I think kind of vaguely worked. Another one was having a universe come into being and then collapse. You know, all the wonderful sort of, you know, the gas cloud and all that, and the planets and everything, and coming around to a black hole, but all taking place in someone's front room within the space of 24 hours. So quite exciting ideas. One of them, which was that Humpty Dumpty should be a murder mystery, became not a short story, but actually a novel, and that was the first book I wrote. But another one of these was called On Call with Robin Ochre, and I envisaged a black and white world where colour had been commodified, right? So nobody could see any colours, but then you would pipe colours to various places. So if you wanted, you know, grass green somewhere, then you'd actually send it through a pipe, and that if someone went through the pipe by accident, all this green would start bubbling up through the ground, and someone would have to come and repair it. And that someone was a character called Robin Ochre, and it was just like a morning on call with him. So when I was searching around for a new idea to put in a book, I thought, right, let's take this idea of Robin Ochre, but let's kind of run with it in a much more bigger way than that. So let's actually create a world in which visual colour dominates every single aspect of people's waking hours. And let's create this idea, create this notion, and then put the people in it, and then see what happens, and see how the whole thing turns out, and then add the characters and plot and everything else. Now, the interesting thing about visual colour, and why I chose visual colour, is that it's actually fascinating in that it doesn't actually exist right? Colour has no colour. And that's sort of totally counterintuitive because you go, well, you know, this looks red to you and me and whatever. But it isn't. It's a product of the mind alone. There is no real colour in the real world. When you see a beautiful sunset, you know, these glorious sort of oranges and everything like that, you should, in fact, reserve the praise for yourself because it's only in your head. It doesn't exist in the real world. And that's a lovely sort of counterintuitive notion. It's a notion, actually, that I was kind of embracing with the Thursday books, in that readers do most of the work, right? Because I just sort of sketch in, or authors just sketch in very rough ideas of how the story should be and how the characters should be, and then you clothe it with your experiences and the images in your head and everything else. It's what makes books very personal to people. What I'll do is I'll read a couple of little paragraphs which give you an idea about how things work in this world. First of all, my lead character is a guy named Eddie Russet, right, who can see red, only red. That's how it works in this world, is that you are the colour that you can see. If you can see purple, and a lot of purple, you'll be at the top of the stack and could even be head prefect, right? But if you can only see, then it goes down, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, and if you're red, then you're at the bottom of the stack, but you could still be a prefect because there are three colour prefects in every single village. It's a very localised sort of society. It's also a highly regimented society with all kinds of rules and regulations. In fact, every single kind of rule and regulation, ranging from the sort of rather welcome, such as everybody should learn to dance. I think this is a very good thing. I think dancing should be actually taught in schools. You know, everyone should be able to rumba, as far as I'm concerned, or do a simple cha-cha-cha, because it's a very nice dance and it looks very good. And I think the world would be a better place if everyone could cha-cha-cha. However, some of the rules are rather bizarre. For instance, there's no number that lies between 72 and 74, and no one can really explain why, which makes long division and multiplication very, very hard, which is why no one really does any mathematics beyond 72. So it's a kind of interesting sort of bizarre world. Now Eddie, who can only see one colour, I'll give you a little idea here what it's like for him to see only one colour. I'll read. Good job I have my glasses on me. There we go. So he's on a train here. Trains have been actually adapted. There's something that happens in this world called leapbacks, right? They call them great leap backwards, and every now and again some major forms of technology are removed. So the characters in my world look forward to the decrease in technology and how they're going to deal with it in the same way that we look forward to the increase in technology and how we are going to deal with it. It's about a different society with different sort of values and how habits and fads can be changed through time. It's just one of the themes that runs through the book. Anyway, so this is Eddie looking out the window of the train. I should say, of course, sorry, that's where I was going with this, is that sometimes when technology is removed, you actually want to keep it because it's very, very important. So there is this thing called loopholery, which means to somehow circumvent the rules. And because they deleted the railways during a great leap backwards, someone pointed out, yes, but they didn't remove the railway, right? So if we have monorails, that's okay. So all the engines which run on steam in this world run on a single track with gyroscopes to keep them balanced upright. It's called an inverted monorail. And somebody actually invented one once. I was fascinated to find that they had. Anyway, that's kind of by the by, but it gives you an idea of what's going on. I stared out of the window, my eyes searching for red as a ratfink stalks a square eel. Now, I should actually make a point here that when one is creating a new world, one can create all manner of stuff in this new world to give it a little bit of extra sort of oomph, a little bit of fizz. And I do like creating new animals and creatures, and the fauna that lives in Eddie's world is very, very strange. There's such things as bouncing goats, which is kind of halfway between a goat and a wallaby, and they sort of bounce through the outland with this sort of boinging noise, which I quite like. A square eel is very like a squirrel, only it's cubist, right? You know, if you can imagine like sort of Picasso painting a squirrel, that's it. That's a square eel. But the other good thing about all the creatures in Eddie's world is that they all have a barcode on them, which is very, very, very convenient if you want to know what it is. And I think this would be a very good idea, especially because I like to, watch birds because I'm British, and you have to. It's just one of those things you have to do, like repeating Monty Python sketches ad nauseum. We learn that at school, actually. It's all on the blackboard, This parrot has ceased to be. It is no more, Much to the annoyance of our womenfolk. Anyway, it'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it, if you're looking through the binoculars and you're looking at a little brown bird, because most birds are small and brown, and it's very annoying in the UK. We don't have brightly coloured birds. It's very annoying. And you're looking through there and you're going, I wonder if that's a sparrow, or what? I don't know. But if you had a barcode reader, you could just go doot, like that, and you go, oh, it's a linnet. How about that? It'd be very easy, wouldn't it? And if there's anyone here who works in retailing, you'll know how useful it is to have barcodes on everything. Have them on your children, Is this one of mine? Doot. Yes, it is. There you go. Simple. Wouldn't it be simple? Anyway, so everything has a barcode. It was midsummer. We were past the welcome cascade of early orchid, and it was now the time of the poppies, sorrel, and pink campions. Once they were done, the snapdragons and maiden pinks would sustain us until the end of the season, and it was in this manner that we reds leapfrogged through the spring and summer on a frugal diet of seasonal bloom. Mind you, the cooler weather at year's end didn't completely dull our senses. Although better suited to orange and yellow eyes than ours, autumn was quite often a rapturous explosion of delights, if the leaves lingered on the branches long enough to be reddened by a fortuitous warm spell. It was the same story for the other colours to a greater or lesser degree. The yellows had more seasonal bloom, blues and oranges had less. The greens, as they constantly reminded us, had only two chromatic seasons, the abundant muted and the abundant vibrant. So a little bit of idea there about Eddie seeing red as he does. Now, the problem, or rather the fun, of creating an entirely different world where you have this strange idea of visual colour dominating people's lives. As I've said, it's the social strata. That's how it works. But also, of course, you would have to know how much colour you could see, and because of this, everyone in this world has their Ishihara test at age 20, which is a very big deal indeed, because it states basically who you are, what you're going to do, where you're going to go. And I'll just read another little section, which is about the Ishihara. And this is Eddie again talking. Despite our closeness, I've never told Dad that I could actually see a lot more red than I let on. The question was not whether I had the 50% needed to be chromagencia and senior monitor, but whether I had the 70% required to become potential red prefect. I was quietly confident that I could, but I wasn't certain. Colour perception was notoriously subjective, and the very human vagaries of deceit, hyperbole, and self-delusion all conspired to make pretest claims pretty much worthless. But all doubts came to naught the morning of your Ishihara. No one could cheat the colour man and the colour test. What you got was what you were forever. Your life, career, and social standing decided right there and then, and all worrisome life uncertainties eradicated forever. You knew who you were, what you would do, where you would go, and what was expected of you. In return, you simply accepted your position within the colourtocracy and assiduously followed the rulebook. Your life was mapped, and all in the time it takes to bake a tray of scones. So, interesting little passage there, but gives you perhaps an idea about how rigorous this society is. Nothing changes. This is all about sustainability, stability, localization, everything, all gone horribly, horribly wrong in the worst possible way. Into this world, we have my character Eddie Russet, who is a sort of self-confessed, unambitious drone of the collective. The idea of change is anathema to these characters. The idea of inquisitive is equally abhorrent. The notion that you should ask questions about anything is considered highly rude, and you wouldn't want to ask a prefect a question like that because it would be wasting their time and that would be frightfully rude. It does sound a little as though that this world seems to have been worked out on the sort of school rules of some public school somewhere, or private school as we call them, and that everything is worked with merits, demerits, and feedback. Personal feedback, I think, is a great idea, isn't it? Well, I think so. So you'd have actually someone, maybe about to get married to someone, and they'd, you're sort of, had a good evening and everything, and they say, okay, well, I better see your feedback And then, of course, you'd have to show your feedback, which every other partner that you've ever had would have filled out for you. I think it'd be quite interesting, you know. Okay, 62% feedback, not very good, you know. Not sure, you know. What's yours, you know? Well, 72. That's a bit better, you know. Also in this world, there's not only lots of feedback, but if you want to be a friend with someone, you just say friend, and they reply friend, and then you're friends. It's very easy. But you can also stop people being friends as well. Which is considered highly rude. And you're only allowed to have 450 friends. So if you want any more friends, you have to delete one off the list. It's a very bizarre world, but it's also highly practical. I'll read you another little section. I should also say that visual colour has also dominated the health service as well. I think it would be a great idea if instead of annoying things like drugs and with their horrible side effects and invasive surgery with that's horrible side effects, that in fact if you're suffering anything at all, like a burst spleen, for instance, a bit unpleasant, admittedly, you're just shown a precise colour and your body would do the rest for you. I kind of like that idea. And Eddie's father is a chromatocologist, and that's what they're doing in East Carmine. Of course, the other side of the whole health healing hues aspect is that there are actually hues that can give you a sort of slight intoxicant. For instance, lime. If you look at lime, which you would do in the privacy of your own home after a long day's work at the linoleum factory, you'd go home, take off your shoes and socks, and then look at some lime, and you'd feel all wibbly. And the world would seem just that little bit better. But of course, as with all these things, it can be abused. And there is Lincoln. And one word about Lincoln is don't. If you look at too much Lincoln, you can do terrible things to your cerebral cortex that could possibly be actually permanent. So you really wouldn't want to do that. Again, you see, we can have lots and lots of fun with visual colour. The other point about visual colour is that it's been commodified, which is much like I was telling you earlier about the Robin Oker short story. And the last little section that I'll read to you will be when Eddie and his father are visiting a colour park. Now, the thing about if there isn't any colour, of course, it has a huge value, right? So my characters, although they can see one natural colour, they can see any synthetic colour. So, for instance, if you can only see red, you would perhaps buy a colourised melon for twice the price of a black and white one, right? And this would be very expensive, it would taste the same, but it wouldn't half impress your date. The idea to have full colorisation in your house, of course, is something that everyone would aspire to. And collectively speaking, a colour park or a colour garden is something of huge value. And this is what they're visiting in this section. Any colorised park was a must-see for visitors, and Vermilion's offering certainly didn't disappoint. The colour garden, laid out within the city walls, not far from the bridge, was a leafy enclave of dappled shade, fountains, pergolas, gravel paths, statuary, and flower beds. It also had a bandstand and ice cream stall, even if there was no band, nor any ice cream. But what made Vermilion's park really special was that it was supplied by colour piped direct from the grid, so it was impressively bright. We walked up to the main grassed area, just past the picturesque ivy-grouped Rodin. There's another thing about this world is that artwork has been dispersed. So if you go to a village, any little village, first thing you'd say is when you arrived, you'd say, do you have any old masters or anything? And they go, oh, yes, we've got 2 Vermeers and a Picasso. You know, oh, who's got them? And you go, oh, go and see so-and-so. And you just knock on someone's door and you say, I've come to see the Vermeer. And they'd take you upstairs and there would be a girl with a pearl earring. And you'd look at it and go, isn't that nice? And the person who looks after it would say, yes, do you want a cup of tea as you're watching? I think it'd be frightfully nice, don't you think? Rather than having them all collected together in these huge collections. I say disperse all the collections. Be wonderful. It'd give a good reason to go to places you'd never been. And that's why they have a Rodin here. Ivy grip Rodin, and stared at the expanse of synthetic green. It was a major improvement on the park back home because the overall scheme was tuned from predominance of red eyes. In Jade under Lime, the bias was more towards those who could see green, which meant that the grass was hardly coloured at all, and everything red was turned up far too bright. Here the colour balance was pretty much perfect, and we stood in silence, contemplating the subtle chromatic symphony laid out in front of us. "Do you think that's really the colour of grass?" asked Dad, after a pause. I shrugged. There was no real way of telling. The most we could say was that this was what national colour felt the colour of grass should be. National colour are the people who supply colour to the world. Ask a green how green grass was, and they'd ask you how red was an apple. But interestingly, the grass wasn't uniformly green. An area the size of a tennis court in the far corner of the lawn had changed to unpleasant bluey green. The discordancy was spreading like a water stain, and the off-colour area had also taken in a tree and several beds of flowers, which now displayed unusual hues quite outside standard botanical gamut. Intrigued, we noticed that there was someone staring into an access hatch close to the anomaly, so we wandered over to have a look. We expected him to be National Colour Engineer working on the problem, but he wasn't. He was a red park keeper, and he glanced at our spots and then held us in a friendly manner. I should say not their spots, like on their face, but everybody wears a little coloured spot, so you know instantly whether you're to look up or to look down, and it's very important to get it all right. I don't want any embarrassing faux pas. It's very British, you know. I like the idea that this is a world in which everybody will finally die out because they were too polite to say no, you know. That's how I think the British would finally go. You know, if we were the last empire on Earth or whatever, we'd have an alien invasion, and someone would say, "Do you think we should do something about it?" You go, "No, haven't been introduced." And they've come all this way. I mean, it'd be frightfully rude of us, really. So let's not do anything, you know, and we'd all be put to death, you know. And that's how I see the British ending, you know, dying through politeness. He glanced at our spots and held us in a friendly manner. "Problems?" asked Dad. "Of the worst sort," replied the park keeper wearily. "Another blockage. The council are always promising to have the park repiped, but whenever they get any money, they spend it on swan early warning systems, lightning protection, or something equally daft." I should mention at this point, though, that there are several fears built into this world. It's always good to have a few fears going around to sort of make the citizenry compliant. And in this particular instance, it's swans, which are very dangerous. I'm sure your mother told you when you were little, or your father, that if you went near a swan, it would break your arm. Has anyone here had their arm broken by a swan? No, exactly. It's all complete nonsense. Although, having said that, I was giving a talk somewhere a few days back, which I can't possibly remember where, and I said that same question, and someone went like this. And I went, "You're joking?" And they said, yes, I actually had my arm broken by a swan. Now, what this does, of course, is to throw into question everything that our parents told us could now be true, right? Like, if you pull a face and the wind changes direction, it will stay like that. And there is a troll up the chimney waiting to eat you if you don't finish your greens. So be warned. I have met the man who did have his arm broken by a swan. John, his name was, John the Swan, as I call him. Anyway, and lightning is the other very frightening thing. So do you want to avoid lightning? And the night, but that's another thing entirely. It was unguarded talk, but we were Reds too, so he knew he was safe. We peered curiously into the access hatch, where the cyan, yellow and magenta colour pipes fed into one of the many carefully calibrated mixers in order to achieve the various hues required for the grass, shrubs and flowers. From there they would feed the network of capillaries that had been laid beneath the park. Colorising gardens was a complex task that involved matching the osmotic coefficients of the different plants with the specific gravity of the dyes, and that was before you got started on pressure density evaporation rates and seasonal hue variation. I'd heard the words, but didn't know what they meant. Colourists earned their perks and bonuses. I had a pretty good idea what the problem was, even without looking at the flow meters. The bluey-green cast of the lawn, the grey appearance of the celandines, and the purplish poppies suggested localised yellow deficiency, and this was indeed the case. The yellow flow meter was firmly stuck on 0. But the viewing port was full of yellow, so it wasn't a supply issue from the park substation. "I think I know what the problem is," I said quietly, knowing full well that unlicensed tampering with national colour property carried a 500 merit fine. The park keeper looked at me, then at Dad, then back to me again. He bit his lip and scratched his chin, looked around, and then lowered his voice. "Can it be easily fixed?" he asked. "We have a wedding at 3. They're only grey, but we try and make an effort." I looked at Dad, who nodded his assent, and I pointed at the pipe. The yellow flow meter's jammed, and the lawn's receiving only the cyan component of the grass green. Although I would never condone rule breaking of any sort, I added, making sure I had deniability if everything turned brown, I believe a sharp rap with the heel of a shoe would probably free it. The park keeper looked around, took off his shoe, and did what I suggested. Almost instantly there was an audible gurgling noise, and the viewing window filled up. Well, I'll be jaundiced, he said. As easy as that. Here. And he handed me a half merit, thanked us, and went off to package up the grass clippings for cyan yellow retrieval. So a bit of fun there, commodifying colour. The interesting thing about National Colour, who supply this stuff through the pipe work and the grid, is of course you do want to be attached to the grid. You do want to have full pressure CYM coming to your village. Otherwise, you just have to rely on sort of standard sort of big like toothpaste tubes, like full of colour, which never give you very very bright colours. And how you can get colour, how colour is manufactured, is by the actual mining of scrap colour, what they call toshing. And this is actually colour that we're known as the previous, capital P, and we were living in this world before the something that happened, capital S, capital H. The people in this world spend most of their time not just on basic food production and things like that, but actually going out and trying to find new quantities of scrap colour to boil down, distill, sort, change into natural colour that can then be sold back to them from National Colour. But this is getting a little harder because after 4 or 5 centuries, of course, everything has pretty much been teased out, and the toshers are having to move further and further afield. And when you can't stay out at night, it's a little bit tricky. So we're almost past peak colour production, so things are looking a little bit grey, shall we say. But I'll also say that Eddie arrives in East Carmine, which is this little village right on the edge of Red Sector West, and there he meets, hoping to just get on with life as normal, and there he meets Jane Grey, who is a very headstrong young lady, who really shows him that perhaps the peaceful, sustainable society that he thinks he lives in is as much an illusion as colour itself. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody.
Well, that's it for this edition of Fast Forward. We hope you found something of interest. We hope you come see us again. Until then, this is Tom Schad saying, take care.